Hi everybody. I already posted a video in this IATIS YouTube channel about the TraduXio-IATIS project and explain specifically how to register and participate in the project. Here, I will provide a more academic presentation based on a paper Philippe Lacour and I presented in Doha last March in a conference about translation in the digital age, from translation tools to shifting paradigms. I will briefly present a rationale and a context for the TI project, report on its main phases of development, after which I will provide a reflection on the extent to which the TraduXio-IATIS space can be considered a digital tool which is both informed by and seeks to contribute to shifting paradigms. This project was born out of a partnership between TraduXio, an online collaborative and multilingual translation space developed with the support of the University of Technology of Troyes in France, and IATIS, which stands for the International Association of Translation and Intercultural Studies. TraduXio is not an automated nor a purely human translation space. It is a CAT tool with a very particular conception of language translation and technology. It is an interpretive conception of language translation and technology opposed to the automatic treatment of language. It considers semantic units as complex and as going beyond words and sentences, and language practices as creative, as governed by singularities rather than rules, in the sense that generalizations are possible, but always with reference to a specific context. Translation is considered as a multilingual rather than a purely bilingual activity, and as collaborative most of the time. The participatory web, the open source and freeware culture can give digital continuity to this conception of language and translation through the development of a translation space that is web-based, open source, collaborative, and that provides different options for licenses, from all the rights reserved to an open license for users and translators to choose from, as a space that is multilingual, that allows for the multilingual and collaborative translation of cultural texts, in the sense that they are not typically repetitive texts, and a space that would be corpus-based and translator-centered. This converges with IATIS principle in the sense that IATIS gathers scholars from across the world in translation studies, both virtually and non-virtually, in co-presence every 3 years in its international itinerary conference. IATIS was founded to decenter translation studies so that theories and practices in translation and communication studies could emerge beyond the Anglo-American world. However, in practice, IATIS functions primarily in English, be it for its internal or external communication. This is typical of most academic organizations which function online in a monolingual way, or perhaps in a bilingual way, but with very little translation in the process. This is a big challenge for the humanities and the social sciences in terms of majoritizing and minoritizing knowledge according to the languages and the cultures from which they emerge. And quite paradoxically, translation is not an exception in the humanities. As we know, translation scholars tend to translate very little, even on their subject matter on translation. Why is that? Is it because of a lack of skills? Not really, because in IATIS, for example, we have people with translation skills, of course. Is it a lack of political will? Not either, because in IATIS we developed a multilingual policy in 2015 in Belo Horizonte, for example, where delegates could choose between the 3 official languages of the conference. Now, extending this policy from the context of a conference to any kind of material, textual or oral material, may not be financially viable, at least in the humanities. Is it a lack of volunteer engagement? Not either, because actually in IATIS many members do dedicate a lot of time to their organization, but they do not spend it on translation activities. So we are left with a hypothesis that there is a lack of an engaging environment for people to enjoy translating in community and collaboratively. So this TI project proposes a solution of creating a suitable translation space, making the most of ICT's potential. There are two objectives in common in IATIS and TraduXio, that of promoting linguistic and cultural diversity in knowledge sharing in the cyberspace and valuing language and translation in research-oriented activities. There are differences, however, and this is why TraduXio needed to be customized for an online community in the making like IATIS. The TI project seeks to develop, to contribute to translation space that would allow to translate on translation. And for this vision to be accomplished, we divided the project into 3 phases. The first one, which is still ongoing, is the initial development of the TI space for the translation of all the abstracts submitted for the upcoming IATIS conference in Hong Kong next July into Chinese. The second phase revolves around developing this space in connection with the conference management system, which is different from the one we are using now and which would converge with our philosophy of language, translation, and science. And the third phase is about extending this space to the IATIS website and the social media so that it would be meaningful beyond the particular organization of a given conference. I will mainly focus here on phase 1. So we needed to create an API so that we would be able to import into the TraduXio-IATIS space all the texts to be translated, the English abstracts, and for after the translation would be over, for exporting them again and ease the production of a bilingual conference program. So for this, we choose a CSV format, which is the format used by EasyChair, the conference management system we are using this year. But again, we may change in the future. So imagine the challenge of translating no less than 300 abstracts and their related keywords. There are several scenarios. Scenario 1, we could export all the abstracts from EasyChair, distribute an Excel Word file to volunteer translators, who would then translate and resend to a manager, who would gather, copy, paste, and probably revise for cohesion throughout. Very patchy, so we discarded it. Scenario 2, we use a Google Doc, same document updated in real time, but very centralizing and not suitable for China, and certainly not engaging and enjoyable space at all for our translators. So we went for scenario 3, which decentralized and distributed the translation management process through the organization of the data, the texts, the abstracts, with basic filters. And this would allow the user, the translator, to sort the original and translated texts by a set of criteria, those of EasyChair, but also those which are specific to a translation project, as we shall see now by accessing the TraduXio-IATIS space. So for those who have already consulted the other video in this channel about how to register and participate, you may want to skip this particular part of the video and go direct to minute 13 of this video. So here we are. This is the TraduXio-IATIS space, which is configured as a database or a corpus. You will find all the abstracts accepted by the Scientific Committee of the Hong Kong Conference, organized and searchable by criteria from left to right. And on top of being able to access these abstracts in an interactive way through the use of keywords, you will also be able to access the translation interface and, of course, to the translations into Chinese. So let's say, for example, I'm interested in fan subbing. I find this abstract, I access it by clicking on the title. And this is the translation interface in which our team of volunteer translators has been working over the last few months. You'll find on the left-hand side all the data in English, organized by title, author, keywords, abstract, and the corresponding translation into Chinese, which you can see here if I scroll down. There are three tools worth mentioning in this translation interface: the concordancer, the glossary, and the chat. So let's start by imagining that I'm a translator and I want to see how the word visibility has been translated across abstracts. In that case, I double click on the word and I can go to the concordancer, which shows me all the occurrences of visibility in English in the left column. Next to it, its translation in Chinese and the corresponding abstract where to find this occurrence and translation. But let's go back to the abstract we were consulting. Let's imagine now that I realize that fan subbing, for example, has been translated in inconsistent ways across abstracts because we are different translators and we may find different acceptable translations, but I want to give it consistency as a reviser. So I will double click and go to the glossary, select the target language and type here the translation of fan subbing, which I believe should be used in this particular project. The third tool is the chat, which I can access here in order to discuss with this translator any issue related to the translation, and I can close when the message is sent. I can close by clicking on the chat symbol again. So let's go back now to the database. So we wanted you to know where we stand. You can use the translation status criteria to see, for example, that we have 5 translations to do still. 4 abstracts are under progress, and almost 300 abstracts have been translated already by our team. Quite a huge task, actually. You can see that some abstracts are already validated, which means that they are ready for publication. So what's next? Basically, we would like to shift from a bilingual to a multilingual interface, which will not be problematic at all because Traduxio is already multilingual. We wanted to make this first stage bilingual to ease the process. We would also like to shift from a text-based to a community-based configuration of the TI space with a customized translator's registration page and an extended user profile. So all in all, this TI space is grounded on a contemporary vision of translation as a collaborative activity of knowledge sharing as a public good and as disinterested. However, we cannot deny that we are also grounded on a certain tradition of translation, which considers translation as a process from one language to another of conventional texts, like abstracts can be in an academic context, and based on a source text and target text equivalence. This shows that this digital innovation is at the interface between the old and the new. And now we would like to further the paradigmatic shift by actually inspiring ourselves from the number of modalities, the plurality of genres, and the multiplicities of barriers that knowledge face by transadapting texts across modalities, genres, and barriers, by translating and adapting across types of text like tweets, blog posts, abstracts, across modalities, oral, written, sign, or across barriers, be them language barriers or hearing or visual impairments. In conclusion, translation studies is a fortunate discipline in terms of theoretical and practical translational skills. However, it is not using this potential to translate itself and to contribute to a more democratic form of knowledge production and sharing. It is in this attempt that the TraduXio-IATIS project has created a space for electronic multilingual cooperation. If you need any further information, please go to our website, iatis.org, and you will find under Hong Kong 2018 Conference an entry point into our webpage of the TraduXio-IATIS project. Thank you very much. See you very soon in Hong Kong or anywhere else in the world, or perhaps online. Thank you and bye-bye.